Good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Ice Creams. We have got a treat for you today, as I've been promoting and been saying on social media. The man that throws Han Solo is with us today. We've got actor Alan Austen. But you know what? Listen, I'm joking around here a little bit jokester, but that's literally only one part of a much bigger story. And we're going to find out a little bit more about that today. So I would like to say welcome to Ice Creams, Alan Austen. How you doing, sir?
Thank you very much. I'm doing particularly well, I think, really. Yeah.
Good stuff. Good to see you're hanging in there. You know what? It's always awkward for me. I know, where do I start these stories? For me, I think for this one, I'd really like to start at the age of 12. If I may, because one thing I've learned over the years is that, when you go to sci-fi conventions and horror conventions, all these things, they say that, 12 is the golden age of imagination. That's when you're really at your kind of hyper age of, you're open to anything. So, Alan, question number one, when you were 12, what was 12 like for you? What were your influences? What were you watching? What were you listening to? That kind of thing.
Well, that's quite a curveball question, actually, but I'm glad you asked it because it's, I've suddenly got all of these memories flooding back into my mind. You asked me about being the age of 12. Well, at the age of 12, for me, life wasn't good, but I had hope. Okay. And I think... during the 1960s, when I wasn't 12, I hit my 12th birthday. Let me try and do the maths on this. I hit my 12th birthday at Christmas 1970.
Okay.
I just started at a really tough London school in South London, where basically if you weren't prepared to go in to school and have a fight, punch up every single day, forget about your education, that wasn't going to happen. Right. I'd already learned by the age of 12 to read and write and do simple arithmetic. But life, basically at the age of 12 in South London, in my part of South London, was enter the jungle. Yeah. You're in the jungle now, kid. Learn to be tough.
Right.
Which I would say stood me in good stead for my future life. I took beatings, I gave beatings, what the hell, But certainly it taught me to grow up quickly. But at the age of 12, when I was prior to that, in the 1960s, when I was at primary school, and a teacher there recognized that I had some creative ability. Miss Dancy, I will never forget her name. She recognized that I had a creative streak and that I could act and I could write. And so she actively encouraged that. But at the age of 12, being sent to this bloody awful London school, secondary school, I had to keep a lid on that because that wasn't for us. South Londoners do not become actors. They do not become writers. They take whatever life offers them. And I've got to say, that wasn't much.
Yeah. If I could say, because we have obviously a lot of listeners that, from North America, that really don't understand the English way of things, and that particular time that you're talking about, there was two notorious gangs, right? The Richardsons and the Krays around that time, right?
Yeah, the Kray twins were incarcerated in prison for life by by the time I was 12.
Okay.
The Richardsons were still active.
Okay.
They were the kings of South London.
Yeah.
My father, in actual fact, my father was a tough London docker, stevedore, the posh word. But my dad had dealings with the Richardson gang.
Okay.
My in so much that, you know, throughout South London working class, there was criminality. Of course, there was.
Yeah.
My dad was a straight, upstanding man, World War II veteran. My dad wouldn't take crap from anyone.
Right.
He was, you know, in my memory of those days, he scared the life out of me. He really did. But he would not be bullied by anyone. And as a shop steward union member in the London docks back in those days, certainly the Cray twins they were in contact with him. They had promised an MP that they could put an end to the dock strikes, which were prevalent in the 60s and the 70s.
Right.
Well, do you know what? My dad walked down Tooley Street, which is just right outside London Bridge Station, which was housed the dock management board. And my dad led 2,000 World War II veterans along Tooley Street to go to the dock management board to vent their argument. They were met by a line of police officers, and my dad approached the police sergeant and said to him, "You're about the same age as me, aren't you, old son?" "Yeah." "You did World War II, didn't you?" "Yep." "You're a veteran?" "Yep." "Look at these blokes behind me. They all did the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think your thin line of police officers is going to do anything to stop that?" The sergeant turned to his men and said, step aside, lads, let them through."
Wow.
That was it. That's how tough it was in those days.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it really.
That's really interesting, and it's super interesting for me because obviously I'm from the other side of the water. I'm from the sort of closer to the east end of London, so I have that sense of history of what London is like, and to hear you recount stories like that, that's pretty damn interesting. That's pretty damn interesting.
Well, I hope so.
No, but completely interesting. You know what? And to anyone listening to this that has any interest in sort of gangs and organized crime and stuff, there's great documentaries. There's not enough focus in North America on what was occurring in London, and I'm telling you, way like crazy interesting. So go check some of that stuff out. I guess my question to you would be, so obviously you come from this, World War II is not that far in the rear view mirror, really. And you're in this tough sort of upbringing. Were you, because obviously, sci-fi and horror factors into a lot of your, where we'll get to come. Were you a sort of a sci-fi horror kid? Like, were you interested in that stuff at that age?
I just grew up with black and white telly, films, Saturday morning pictures, anything to do with movies and television. I was just fascinated. I can remember my older brother John actually snuck me into the Saturday morning pictures where we lived in Peckham in the 1960s. I was underage. I think you had to be 7 or something like that. I don't know. but he snuck me in, and that was my first experience of Saturday morning pictures, which became my highlight of the week. Every Saturday morning, you know, I would go around to my great grandmother and cadge sixpence from her to get into the Saturday morning pictures at I think it was the Odeon in Peckham. I believe it's gone now.
Yeah.
And that was my life. That's I was just fascinated by film. I remember that one day in the 60s, I was off school. You know, I wasn't a great fan of school.
You and me both.
And so I think I'd pulled a sickie, I don't know. But I can remember that I'm sat on the rug in the front room of our old Victorian terraced house in Peckham with the TV on. And they were showing the film that they were running was, great Spencer Tracy movie, still one of my favorite movies to this day. Northwest Passage,
Okay.
I believe it's called, yeah. The film was originally made in color. I didn't see it in color until many years later. Of course, this was the days of black and white, but the film was actually made prior to World War II in color. And, you know, Spencer Tracy is this, you know, explorer, scout that leads, set in the 1700s, before the American War of Independence, when Britain still ruled, you know, the east coast of America.
Yeah.
And he was leading this expedition, you know, and it was, so I'm sitting there watching this film, you know, fascinated. And my dad come home from work early from the docks. They used to work ridiculous shifts. They'd work through the night sometimes. I think he'd been working a night shift. And he stood there. I mean, he was a huge man, you know, and he just looked at me and said, "What are you going to do when you grow up?" And I just pointed to the TV, and Spencer Tracy was in a shot on, you know, in the scene from the film, and I just said, I pointed at it and just said, "I'm going to do what he does." And my dad roared with laughter. He just roared with laughter and walked out of the room. What can I say? You know, I got into the movies.
Yeah, yeah. And you know what? That's actually, I was going to ask you what was, so that answers the question for me of what your first influence, like your first, that was obviously, sounds like that was the moment where you just, the light bulb went, and that's what you wanted
that
to
was
do.
when yeah, it was something I didn't verbalize or voice. But my dad asked me the question, and that was my answer. And yeah, that was my heart speaking.
Did he come around to the idea, Alan?
Eventually, yeah, took him a long time. He never, he couldn't understand it. He couldn't understand me. But the moment that I realised that he'd come around to it was when I had a lead part in a television drama documentary called Letters from a Bomber Pilot. And this would have been mid-1980s. And that was, when that was first aired, it was a huge success. It would, you know, millions of viewers. The critics were in the tabloids the next day were full of it. And My dad by this time was an ambulance driver for the NHS.
Okay.
He was almost retired, so he was just seeing out the last few years of his working life doing that. And he was so proud the next day in work when people were saying, "That was your son. That's your son."
Wow. Yeah. And you know, I mean, as much as we try to, you know, when we take those, as men, when we take those steps into adulthood, you know, we try to take this approach that, you know, well, I don't care really what my parents think, I'm going to do it, blah, blah, blah. But deep down in here, there's always that, you want that. Yeah, that's so amazing. That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
We want to make, I think as men, we want to make our fathers proud of us, don't we?
It's natural. You know, it is what it is, right? It's inbuilt. So turning the clock back a touch. So you make that momentous decision. You're watching Spencer Tracy, you know, fascinating actor, and you make that the light bulb goes off. This is where I want to be. Now you start putting one foot in front of the other, and you start that journey.
Yeah.
How does that begin? You're starting to gain momentum to where you want to be at. How do you start?
Well, from the way it worked for me, you know, I watch other British actors, posh British actors. Oh, my mother took me to the theatre when I was 5, and I fell in love with the stage and performing, and then I knew that's what I had to do, and so I went to RADA. Well,
oh, lovely.
For the South London boy, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, right.
It's a different approach. And you mentioned the Cray twins, the Richardson brothers, the Richardson gang. I, being a South London boy, I took up amateur boxing. My eldest brother, Donald, was a champion boxer as an amateur and turned professional in the late 1960s. Well, a lot of that is shrouded in mystery. He doesn't talk about it much. But associated with the world of boxing is the world of criminality,
yeah,
and gang.
Yeah.
Very much so. And but I used to train at a very spit and sawdust boxing gym in South London called Gordon's Gym. I don't think it's there anymore, but uh, it was a hive of villainy, but also top athletes. The strange thing is that Arnold Schwarzenegger actually trained there.
Really?
He did. When he first came to the UK and was already, you know, becoming a champion bodybuilder, he found a trainer that could enhance his performance as a weightlifter, bodybuilder, that worked out of Gordon's Gym. And so I remember that a documentary was being made about Schwarzenegger and his rise. This is before he entered the film industry. And my brother was actually happened to be having a workout there on one of these particular days that the film crew came down, and he was interviewed as part of the documentary. But I mean, this would have been very early 1970s. Actually, probably no, a bit later than that. A bit later. This would have been probably late 1970s. But I'm digressing. But the thing is that, you know, I was you know, I was doing my, you know, my boxing training, and Was doing some, drama classes, that kind of thing. I would have been about 17 or 18, I guess, at the time. And trying to get into the industry. How do you get into the industry? And it was full of unions, and they were closed shops, and you couldn't just walk into it. You kind of had to know somebody or have connections of some sort or another. But a lot of the guys that used to train at Gordon's gym were bit part actors, sometimes stuntmen,
Okay.
sometimes background artists,
Mm-hmm.
And they've been in the industry for quite a few years when it was easier to get in, and these guys were tough guys.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted tough guys,
Okay.
The days of, when I was a kid watching old British movies, you'd have rather trained posh actors that would pitch up in a black and white British movie and try to do a Cockney accent. Well,
Yeah.
those days have gone.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Caine was now more than established.
Yeah.
And Michael Caine led the way for us Londoners. He really did. He is the governor. He is the boss. He led the way. And of course, Terence Stamp following in his footsteps, and a few others.
Yep.
But Michael Caine is the governor. He made it credible for a London actor to actually become a movie star. And of course, people like Bob Hoskins then following his wake. And I had a conversation with Bob many years ago about this very subject. And he agreed wholeheartedly with me. He said, yeah, Al, you got to remember that Mike is the governor. He was the first, he was the pioneer,
Mm-hmm.
That made it possible for us guys to do this.
Yeah.
So just being in that sort of melee of doing, being involved in amateur boxing and the villains, that I got the information that I needed.
Yeah.
Well, look, what do you want to do? Do you want to go? Do you want to be on stage? Not particularly. Not particularly, what do you want? I just want to be in the industry. I don't care. Just bloody, get me onto a film. I'll walk past the camera, be a blur. I don't care. I just want to be in the industry.
Yeah.
And so with much striving, my great friend, Kelly Garfield, who's sadly no longer with us, I used to, we used to train together at the gym. He was a tremendous boxer, tremendous. And he was already part of the Film Artists Association, and he'd worked on Quadrophenia about the time that we'd met. And he helped me. He helped me get in. He I wouldn't say open doors, but he taught me what I needed to do and the procedure that was necessary. So to make the applications to the unions and to central castings and all of that. And it was very, very slow and nothing was happening. And then I think what happened from memory was because Hollywood had all of these films lined up that needed strong CGI. And the UK had the best reputation for that kind of work. And also at that point, it was cheaper to make films in the UK than it was in the USA.
Right.
And so the FAA opened their books up, or opened their membership up to young men such as myself, that all these films were lined up where you needed soldiers, policemen, etc. You needed youngsters to be able to jump and run around a bit.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah. Very physical.
exactly. And so the doors were opened up for at that point, a brief period of opportunity. I had my application in, and so I was in. They got me in.
Gold. And that's when we kind of hit, you just had a golden streak of just, wow, like the films that you were in from that point. So, I mean, Empire was the first, right?
That was the first job. Yep, that was the first gig.
Okay. So 1970, so was it shooting in 79, or was it shoot? I know it was released around 1980, right? So how did, so at that point, I mean, let's stop for a second here, and because I often talk to, there's a lot of millennials and people that are, they're into Star Wars now and they love it, but they really don't understand the impact that film had, the original, when it was released at the time. I can remember watching, there'd just been nothing like it. You and I both know this at our age, right? I remember watching the first trailer for the original Star Wars as a kid on the TV, and it was the scene where the Millennium Falcon is being attacked, and R2-D2 and C-3PO are walking, and there's an explosion, and C-3PO falls to the side. And I remember thinking, Alan, as a kid, my God, he looks so cool. He must be the bad guy, because I'd never seen like a robot like that C-3PO character. So this is this is already a massive phenomenon. Now you're coming in at what is ultimately going to become basically the Mona Lisa of the franchise. I think nobody would question that Empire is hands down the greatest film. How does that journey begin for you? Where does Empire come across your desk there?
Well, it's actually quite a simple process, you know. And I agree with everything you said, and often when I look back, it feels like, or it seems like it should have been so complicated, but it wasn't. It was really, really simple. I spent the day in London going to the FAA and completing their forms and supplying a passport photograph, and then got on the bus and went along up the road to Central Casting's office and did the same thing with them. And it was a question of, well, you're in. You're now a member of the FAA. You can now work for Central Castings. Go home and wait for the phone to ring. Oh, but by the way, it's useful if you phone in every day about 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening, just to see if there's anything for tomorrow. So it meant being available. And after a few weeks with nothing happening, getting quite frustrated, it's, can you be at Elstree Film Studios tomorrow? Yeah, right. Your call time's 6 a.m. It's a film called The Empire Strikes Back. Oh, what's that all about? Just be there tomorrow at 6. Click, phone goes down. That was it. So you might find this funny, right? Dad, what's up, son? I've got a film call for tomorrow morning. Have you? Yeah. Well, what is it? I don't know. Wow. It's called The Empire Strikes Back.
Oh my God.
Oh, I'll bet it's a World War II jobby. I'll bet it's set after Dunkirk. I'll bet it's something set after Dunkirk, because remember, my dad, by the time of Dunkirk, had just signed up for the Air Force. He literally, after living through the Blitz, well, the Blitz came a bit later, but he'd literally just signed up for the Air Force. And oh, but it's a World War II picture. Oh, but it's about after Dunkirk. Or The Empire Strikes Back must be the Empire striking back against the Nazis.
Wow. Yeah.
So He said, I'll show you how to march. I'll show you how to march. So he had me marching up and down the front room.
Oh my God.
You know,
Yeah.
he did. Oh no, this is how you do it. Yeah, all right. Well, this is, yeah, okay. I mean, you know, 15, 20 minutes or whatever. It's not going to teach you how to march, but it was just, it was a gesture, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
and that was it. But, you know, and my hair was long. My hair
Okay.
was long at the time. And he said, all right, expletives deleted. Right, son, they'll have that effing barnet off you tomorrow morning.
Oh my God. That's nice.
They'll have that barnet. They'll have that barnet fair off you tomorrow, son. For North American listeners, that's Cockney rhyming slang for hair. Barnet fair hair.
Yeah, yeah.
And you know, my dad was a Cockney, and we used to talk in rhyming slang with each other most of the time. So you know, I arrived at, you know, I didn't sleep that night. You know, I went to bed, but
Yeah.
I didn't sleep. I set the alarm clock, everything else, and you know, I got myself up and double early and got the first train out of Sidcup, where we were living at the time, to get up to, you know, to London, to then make the changes, to get to Elstree, you know, to Boreham Wood. And you know, I got there with about 15, 20 minutes to spare before my call time, not knowing what I was walking into.
Right, right.
And, you know, I got to the security gate, and my name was on the list to be allowed in. The security guard told me, you know, which stage to go to, and you know, it was March 1979. You know, it was still dark at that time of the
Right.
morning. You know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and cold, and you know, I'm wandering around the studio trying to find this stage, and I got to. Well, it must have been the stage. I got there anyway, and there's this middle-aged guy, you know, 40-something guy, with striking silver hair, was smoking a cigarette, you know, outside the stage door. And me, in my naivety and my greenness, said, oh, hello, I'm looking for D stage, whatever it was. I'm supposed to be working on this film, The Empire Strikes Back. And the call, he was a cool guy. He said, you're at the right place, son. You're at the right place. What's your name? Alan. Oh, my name's Alan too. Alan Harris. Alan Harris is a legend of the original trilogy. And I said, well, what do I do next? He stubbed his cigarette out and said, come with me. I'll show you the ropes. He became a great friend, you know, but he is, you know, what can you say? He was a legend. And so, yeah.
So you go in there and you start seeing, were you a fan of Star Wars, the first Star Wars?
I'd never seen it.
So none of this thing, so nothing's really striking you in terms of familiar imagery when you go in there?
No, nothing at all. I mean, it was so overwhelming in that this was my first day at a film studio. I'd never seen a film studio.
Never seen a film studio, right, right.
This was my first experience of setting foot into a stage.
Yeah.
In a film studio.
Wow.
Everything was new. As Alan Harris said to me, he said, what we've got to do, son, is we've got to find the runner. He said, he's around here somewhere because he's just signed me in. And he'll have your name on the list and you'll be signed in. and you'll be given a chit, which was a green copy of several copies, that basically, your name on it, what you were booked as, and your daily fee, and that was your proof of identity. And at the end of the day, you handed your chit in, and you got paid.
Wow. Wow. Like
and
that.
they either said to you, don't come back tomorrow, or can you come back tomorrow? One or the other.
Right.
Well, my first day, basically, they put me into the Mao crowd dressing room, and I did nothing. Sat around drinking tea, reading newspapers, getting to know the other, Mao crowd, and it carried on like that for a week. It was the end of every day. Put your chit in, paid us in cash. Can you come back tomorrow? Yeah, I'll be back tomorrow. Cool.
Nice.
And it carried on like that for a week, with nothing happening. And it was like, well, what's going on? What's this all about? You weren't really allowed to wander around. I mean, I went for a wander around, Elstree Film Studios to get to know that, but you weren't allowed on any of the sets.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, you couldn't just wander around freely like that. It was like, basically, outside is fine. And let's face it, a film studio is basically a factory.
Yeah.
So it was, akin to walking around, an industrial estate.
Oh, really?
To see, yeah. I mean, it was just, so it was like, well, all right, they're paying me, but what have I actually, what have I embarked on here? What's going on? Is anything going to happen? And this is where I met John Mogridge, who was my counterpart. It was John and I that placed Han Solo into the carbonator.
Okay.
And John was just sat opposite me, and we struck up a conversation. We were the same age, and it turned out that we didn't live very far from each other. John was a South Londoner too, and basically that was the start of a 40+ year friendship. There you go.
Amazing. And your Empire journey, I mean, and you tell me if I'm wrong on this, but from my understanding, you weren't just the stormtrooper. You were one of the rebels. You were doubled for Harrison Ford. Is that correct at certain scenes?
Yeah. I mean, John has a much better memory than me of what happened back in those days. But we were in the dressing room for a week. Then, the weekend came around. We had the weekend off, come back again on Monday. And then they dressed us as Hoth rebels.
Right, okay.
And so we were running around in on Echo Base.
Yeah.
And that's when I got casually chatting to Harrison Ford. We were, I mean, this went on for days and weeks where, we were just, run past the camera, do this, do that.
Yeah.
And I had a whole day in one of the caverns with Harrison Ford and not really doing much at all. And it was bloody hot under those lights. Yeah. And the Hoth rebel outfits were dressed for Arctic temperatures.
Yeah.
And it was hot. And Harrison would pace up and down. I mean, I'd just sit myself on the floor, crouch on my haunches or whatever. And Harrison would pace up and down. obviously going through his lines in his head, etc., etc., getting himself into, into the motivation for the next scene. And by this time, Harrison and I were on nodding terms. And we'd say, hi, how are you? Yeah, okay. Not much more than that. So I just said, and it was hot, and I just said to Harrison, is it warm enough for you, Harrison? And he looked at me and said, kid, I'm sweating my balls off. Broke the ice. So from there on, we were on chatting terms, not like, giving each other life stories. And well,
I understand.
Years of age, but it was, it kind of, we were familiar with each other.
Nice, nice.
And it did help on set because, the assistant directors could see this, that there was a rapport going on. John Mogridge had also built up a similar rapport with Harrison and, the other cast members. I mean, Carrie was just so friendly. It was unbelievable.
Wow.
So they kept on asking us back. I mean, after the Hoff Rebels, we were dressed as snow troopers.
Yep.
Only for a few days.
Okay.
To do that that scene. Then it was X-Wing pilots, and then it was stormtroopers.
Okay.
And then about the same time, they asked me to do the photo shoot for the Bespin Guard. They asked myself, my dear friend Kelly Garfield, who I mentioned earlier in the interview.
Yep.
He was by now working on the film along with myself, and his brother Dean. And they asked the three of us to come up and do a photo shoot with Billy D. Williams as the Bespin Guards. And the reason for the photo shoot was they just needed to send the pictures over to Hollywood to get approval for the Bespin Guard costume.
Okay.
So we didn't know if we were going to be dressed. We were dressed as Bespins, but we didn't know if we'd be doing any scenes as Bespins.
That's all right, yeah.
Because this was literally just, guys, come up, do the photo shoot. We'll send them up. Hollywood approved, said, yeah, go ahead. And so, yeah, I was dressed as five different characters on ESB.
Wow. And then, so you have this, and then you come back, and then you're called back later to do, when they're doing reshoots, right? Is that correct? And you're double Harrison? Me personally, I had a really good long run on the film, my first film. And, from March through to July, August of 79. I mean, I'm sorry, it's my alarm clock going off in the background. You got to be on set, quick, hurry up.
But that's it. That's what it does. It sounds exactly like the bloody bell. On set. No, it'll turn itself off in a second. If it doesn't, I'll throw the bloody thing out the window. There you go. No, what it is, it's a 1970 alarm clock that I found in a junk shop, and it's modelled on a clock from an E-type Jag, and it's made in about 1970, and the bloody thing's busted. It still works, but I've got no control over the alarm, and it goes off whenever it wants, and I can't switch it off. Anyway, I've digressed. But when it goes off, it's exactly like the bell to go on set, the shooting bell, or, when the red light goes up and everything closes down and silence only, all work stops. Anyway, but I've digressed. Where were we?
Yeah, so you were being called back for reshoots. You were doubling for Harrison.
Yeah. And I'm not sure how that came about, but, we'd finished, everyone, you know, the cast had gone back to America, all the sets were being demolished. And Central Castings just phoned me up, which was actually unusual for them. And Alan, could you be around for the next couple of days? Yeah. Well, they wanted to go back to Elstree to the Empire Strikes Back set. Really? What for? Well, they want you to body double for Harrison Ford. Really? So, well, yeah, of course I'll do it. Of course I will. So I went back there, and I get confused with dates, you know. But anyway, I've gone back there, and literally everything was being pulled down, demolished, stuff being put away. And they dressed me up in Harrison's outfit as Han Solo. I mean, Harrison was long back in America by this time, you know, vamoose time. And what it was, you know, they'd set up some consoles and stuff like that, and they just wanted to use my hands for twiddling knobs and switching dials and that kind of thing, and a few sort of, you know, side of the head things, that kind of thing. And that was the easiest job I'd ever done in my life. My God, you know, and actually it gave me a taste of what it's like being an actor on set, you know, where they just sat me in a director's chair, supplied me with tea and coffee all day long and snacks, and you know, and they just said, well, we'll give you a shout when we're ready, Alan. And then it would be, you know, so I'd be sitting there reading newspapers, blah blah. It was enjoyable in a way, but it was strange to be sitting there while the work was going on around me, and you know, then they Alan, we're ready for you. You know, dragged me up. There was no. I think they stopped the work just in case, because there was no sound being used. It was literally, this is just going to be, you know, side glances and, you know, just your hands and stuff like that. But yeah, they dressed me as Han Solo, which was cool. And do you know what? Where I get really angry with myself. Well, it's not my fault. I wish someone had tapped me on the shoulder and said at that time, Alan, see all those Polaroids laying around the floor? Yes. Pick a few of them up, put them in your pocket, take them home, because in years to come, you're signing at conventions.
Right.
And you'll be signing as the double for Harrison Ford. I didn't know. You know, I didn't know this was going to happen in the future, but I should have done. I should have grabbed a couple and just, you know, took them home with me. I mean, that's what Billy D did with that photograph of us, you know, as the Bespins.
Yeah.
Billy D picked a couple of the Polaroids up and posted them to his son Corey in America. I think Corey was probably about 14 at the time, but he posted them over to Corey. Look, this is what Dad's doing on set. And so Corey kindly allows me to use that photograph, because it's his property. You know, it's his. Well, you could argue it's Lucasfilm's property, but what the hell?
Yeah.
But I wished I'd done the same.
Yeah, but you know what, Alan? To be fair to you, you know, and I mean, I don't know if this makes you feel any better at all, but you know, summer blockbusters and blockbuster movies, you know, it's a regular thing now. But back then, you know, the advent of the summer blockbuster was Jaws, which was only 4 years before Empire Strikes Back. Like, yeah, it was, and it's your first job on a movie to begin with. Hindsight is 2020, you know. So it's I personally, you know what? Trust me, I've done things myself where I've like, oh gee, I wish I'd have done this or that, because you know this could have helped me. But it sucks. I'm going to ask you a favor, if I may.
Of course.
Because this is absolutely fascinating stuff. Like, I'm thoroughly enthralled with this. And Zoom only gives you, it's giving me an hour now. And I don't want to gloss over the rest because we're only scratching the surface here. Could we possibly make this a 2-part interview? Would you be cool with that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
Because you know what, like, I don't want to, you've done, and just so other people understand why I'm saying this. Alan's, he's been in Flash Gordon, he's been in Octopus, he's been in American Werewolf in London. Jeez, like, and then we're not even getting to, the fabulous movies that, he's done with 2 of my favorite independent, filmmakers right now, Emma Dark and M.W. Daniels, where he's in front of the camera. So let's wrap this up right here then, Alan, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
And we'll schedule a part 2 for this. Is that okay?
That is absolutely fine with me. I've really enjoyed doing the interview. I strangely never get tired of talking about the old days. But yeah, I mean, I must say, and we'll talk about this more in part 2, but I am so grateful to Emma Dark and Martin Daniels for trusting me, giving me an opportunity, to revive my career. I mean, I walked away from acting many years ago. As far as I was concerned, I was retired until I got picked up for the convention scene, which was a shock and a wonderful surprise. And it's nice. In fact, it's wonderful to be asked to take part in these new movies. It really is. And I've kind of proved something to myself. But it's wonderful. But yeah, we'll talk more about that in part 2.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing. So what you can look forward to in part 2, ladies and gentlemen, is Alan heads to Mongo for Flash Gordon. He's taking on a werewolf in American Werewolf in London. And as spoiler alert, he lived because he's here right now. 007, Salient -10, and Martin Daniels, the other soul of Evie. Alan, thank you so much for being here today. I am thoroughly loving this, and that's why I asked that, because I just don't want to gloss over. I don't want to do that blah 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 blah, because there's too much good stuff here, right? Thank you for joining us. Have yourself a wonderful evening, sir, and we'll schedule part 2. Okay.
Been a pleasure. I look forward to it. Just let me know.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.